My name's Jack Collins, and I'm a private investigator. I live on a rundown sailboat in Harbor Ridge Marina in Los Angeles, and I'm broke. If I were a wizard like that other Merlin, I'd conjure up a paying client this very minute. My last girlfriend dumped me because I was broke. That was 4 very lonely celibate months ago. As a kid, my dad made up bedtime stories about me being a private eye living on a yacht called Seabreeze and flying all over the world solving crimes with my 4 dogs, Duke, Shadow, Rocky, and Scout. I trained service dogs for autistic children on weekends for free. I gathered up my 4 ferocious attack guard dogs, Duke, Shadow, Rocky, and of course Scout. They're chihuahuas, but very ferocious chihuahuas. I call them the Wild Bunch. I waved hello to Ava Reed, the incredibly beautiful blonde who lived on a 40-foot sailboat next to my boat and sometimes on my boat. She moved into her boat slip the same day a large trawler named the Honor moved into a slip across from us. She'd been my neighbor for about a week. Forget the Maltese falcon, she was the stuff that my dreams were made of. One night during a massive thunderstorm, she came onto my boat crying, wearing only a soaked nightgown. She was petrified by thunder and lightning. It reminded her of the artillery fire in her native country when she was a young child and still frightened her. The first thing I saw were her long, amazing legs that went all the way up and stopped at her waist. One was flesh and bone, the other was a high-tech prosthetic leg. I had seen the chest of a lot of women. Unfortunately, they were on the internet. Hers were the most perfect chest I'd ever seen up close in real life. As she stood next to me, I held and kissed her chest, and in less than 30 seconds, I was madly in love with her. She turned up my stereo to drown out the thunder, then she jumped into my bed and gave me the most passionate night of my life. I was astounded that a chest that perfect was natural. In the morning, the storm departed, and so did Ava. Thank goodness there was another thunderstorm that week. Ava returned to my boat and me, but this time, after the storm, she didn't leave. She was now my girlfriend, at least in my mind, and I was the happiest destitute private eye on earth. She loved to sing show tunes and had a beautiful voice with an adorable, thick Southern accent. I lived in a perpetual Broadway show, and I loved it. My looks rated no better than a 5, while she was most definitely a 10. In the back of my mind, I was afraid that our relationship couldn't last very long. Occasionally, Ava had to travel for business. I feared she had another lover, but I was too scared to know for sure, so I never investigated. Some private eye I was. I knew I would end up like Elvis Presley did in Heartbreak Hotel if I asked her questions, and besides, I was afraid of the answers. One morning, Ava and I walked my dogs down the Venice boardwalk past stoners and an endless assemblage of druggies, drunks, deadbeats, and other assorted losers, my friends and peers, in other words. The Santa Ana wind picked up its litter, flew through the air. Blockade, a 300-pound black man, wore a green sequin suit topped by a green derby hat. He gave hula hoop lessons as he sang along with his karaoke machine. Blockade had an amazing singing voice. Every so often he burst into opera. His absolute mirror-perfect imitation was of Paul Robeson singing Old Man River. He saved that for the very end of his show because it always brought down the house and brought in some big tips. Sometimes Ava sang along with him, and that drove the crowd wild because she sounded like Julie Andrews, but with a thick Southern, not English accent. Business was slow. The crowd was small and unenthusiastic. He called out to me, pretending we didn't know each other. I acted like a ringer to bring in a crowd. "Man, this Santa Ana is killing my sinuses," he whispered to me and Ava as she took my dog's leashes, and Blockade handed me an oversized hula hoop. I did a few revolutions to the amusement of the crowd of German and Chinese tourists. Then the hoop dropped below my knees, and I fell over. I was a laughingstock, but Ava and the crowd cheered and applauded my effort. AWOL, I whispered to Blockade. AWOL means always west of Lincoln Boulevard, which means you live in the Marina or Venice and all that implies. We were an eclectic assortment of penniless losers and multimillionaires who coexisted barely. AW, right back to you, Blockade replied as he and I fist-bumped. The unmistakable aroma of marijuana wafted through the ocean breeze from Dr. Green's storefront cannabis clinic. Again, Blockade persuaded me to demonstrate my lack of hula hoop aptitude, or as he called it, hooped. I almost had the damn hoop rotating when 2 gunshots rang out in Dr. Green's marijuana clinic 10 feet from me. I turned around as 2 skinny, shaved-head white guys with snake tattoos and swastikas on their arms burst out of the clinic door, knocking over Ava and plowed straight into me. Skinny robber number 1, who wore a Clippers t-shirt, and I fell onto the hot pavement. Before I could even give the attack command, my 4 chihuahuas attacked Clippers' ankles and kept him down. Then Duke went for his throat. He didn't tear it out, he just clamped his jaw on the guy's throat. Clippers tried to get up, but he had a dog attached to his throat, 2 more on his ankles and 1 clutching his groin. His left leg was hooked up in my hula hoop, and we both fell forward again. He dropped his 9mm Sig Sauer semi-automatic pistol and smashed his face against the concrete pavement. The hula hoop trapped me on top of him. His backpack went flying onto the ground. A strong gust of Santa Ana wind picked up dozens of Ben Franklins, and they swirled around like a green tornado before falling onto the sand. When I had put out my hand to break my fall, my hand landed on his gun, which was pointed at his face. "Don't shoot me, please! I give up!" He screamed at me as the barrel of the gun in my hand serendipitously pressed up against his bleeding nose, and Duke growled as he held a vice-like grip around the guy's throat. I was more shocked than he was and wasn't sure what to do. I hadn't been in a fist fight since the one I lost in 7th grade, but in my defense, she was a foot taller and 5 pounds heavier than I was. I'm not a tough guy. I gave my dogs the release command. My dogs circled Clippers, growling at him. He was more scared of my dogs than my gun. Blockade knocked down the other robber with a right fist so fast that I hadn't even seen it move. Number 2 rocketed back about 40 feet, as if he'd hit a Star Trek-like force field. Simultaneously, Ava saw that I had a gun on one guy, and she stood over the other robber and shoved the barrel of a snub-nosed .38 Colt Cobra into his face. I didn't know that she packed a gun. This woman was just full of surprises. Blockade gathered up the money and relieved me of Mr. Sig Sauer's favorite 9mm. Then he handcuffed the person. The 3 of them walked into the clinic, and I heard the 2 highwaymen scream in pain. I walked away quickly. I was feeling an adrenaline high better than from any coffee ever brewed. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt good about myself. Blockade walked over to me, and I saw blood on his green sequin suit. It wasn't his blood. Man, crazy happens when the Santa Anas blow. I never pegged you for a tough guy. The boss says thank you and wants you and your dogs to have this. Blockade handed me $400. That would pay a lot of overdue bills. Boss? You work for Dr. Green? I asked. You think I'm out there singing for my health? I saw the way you wrestled that thief to the ground and grabbed his gun. You're brave and quick thinking. You're totally AWOL. That's why I love you, Ava said, then smiled at me, hugged me, and kissed me. This reward was better than the Medal of Honor. I didn't want to spoil the mood, so I didn't ask why she packed a gun. I wasn't anywhere near as brave or AWOL as Blockade and Ava thought, but I chose not to correct them. Ava grabbed my hand, and almost running, she led me back to my boat. When you aimed your gun at that guy, I was so turned on. I wanted to rip off your clothes then and there. For the rest of the day and most of the night, Ava demonstrated her appreciation of me in bed. She did things to me I had never before even imagined. Based on her moaning and screaming, she enjoyed our time together as much as I did. I was afraid this was all a dream, a wet dream, the greatest wet dream in history, but it was real. The next morning on my boat, Rocky, a 3-month-old 5-pound Chihuahua, sauntered over to Tommy Jr., a 7-year-old sandy-haired autistic boy. Tommy Jr. had been staring at the refrigerator in the cabin of my boat for the past 5 minutes. He stared at it with total concentration, but without emotion. Rocky licked Tommy Jr.'s face through the helmet that the child had to wear. Tommy's father stared at Ava, who stood on the deck of her boat. For a moment they locked eyes, and I thought they knew each other, but I decided that he, like every other man, looked at Ava just because she was beautiful, though Ava did seem to look knowingly at Tommy Jr.'s father. I guess that was understandable since he was a handsome man. Tommy's father's cell phone buzzed. I was angry that he hadn't shut it off because the noise might distract Tommy Jr. His father was busy texting and not paying attention to his son. I looked through the peephole and saw that, coincidentally, Ava was texting with someone. It struck me as strange that as they looked at their texts, they both laughed at the same time. Tommy Jr. turned away from the refrigerator and tried to make sense of Rocky. Rocky licked Tommy Jr.'s nose. Jr. softly touched Rocky's nose with his nose. I gently took Tommy Jr.'s hand and stroked Rocky's head. Tommy Jr. got the idea and continued petting the dog. Rocky felt safe with Tommy Jr. and curled up in his lap. Tommy Jr. felt safe with Rocky. I had spent an hour a day for the previous week holding Rocky and allowing Tommy Jr. to acclimate to the dog's presence. Tommy Jr. didn't smile, but neither did he scream or smash his head against anything, his usual method of communication. For the first time in his life, Tommy Jr. was voluntarily relating to another living being. Tommy's father, Judge Kenneth Hale, softly said, "Judge Hale hugged me so hard that my ribs were about to crack. All the experts, all the doctors, all the time, all the money, a lot of money, a damn fortune. It just took a puppy and someone like you, Jack. I will never forget what you've done for my son. This is the first time he's interacted with a living being. You've rescued him from the valley of the shadow of death." The judge wiped tears from his eyes. "This is the happiest day of my life since I graduated from Yale Law School." The judge twisted the Yale ring on his finger. "My wife and I are eternally grateful. I guess that none of the doctors or scientists grew up with an autistic brother. I saw the change that came over my brother when we adopted a golden retriever named Rusty. We rescued Rusty and she rescued my brother. Jack, if you ever need help, or if you ever need a friend or legal advice, or if you're ever in a jam, call me. I'm a federal judge. I'm a good friend for a private detective to have. Here's my cell phone number and home address. Remember, any time, night or day." The judge's son hugged me and brought me back to reality. That hug meant the world to me. When Judge Hale and his son left, I saw him look at Ava, and she looked back at him and nodded. I love dogs, and they love me. I understand dogs, and they understand me. I love women, but I don't understand them, and by and large, they have no interest in me. Aside from the fact that I'm short, average-looking, and broke, I think I'm a great catch for the right woman. I'm loyal, loving, kind, and fiercely protective. When a woman wants loyal, loving, kind, and fiercely protective, she buys a dog and pays me to train him. Then the dog gets to sleep on her bed with his head on her chest, the lucky scumbag. I can do that too, and besides, I'm already housebroken. But now with Ava, everything had changed. I didn't understand why, and I didn't care why. I no longer felt like a loser. It was another beautiful day in Harbor Ridge. Ava Reed, my gorgeous blonde girlfriend, sat sunbathing on her yacht. She waved to me as I climbed back onto my boat. I was so distracted that I slipped on the wet swim step. My right leg sank into the water up to my knee. I cursed at my clumsiness. I have an aversion to submersion. I pulled myself out of the drink and walked down into the cabin to dry off. As a rule of thumb, the more beautiful the woman, the bigger the boat she tends to have. Some women care only about the size of a guy's dock. Ava was gone on one of her mysterious business trips for several days. I played Bob Marley music, picked up my ukulele, and played along with Bob for close to 10 minutes. Together, Bob Marley and I sang Three Little Birds, One Love, and more. I sang the first line of Waiting in Vain inside my boat, and outside the boat, I heard Ava's beautiful voice singing the second line in response. I was speechless. I didn't know she had returned. She continued singing a few more bars. "Ahoy! Is anyone on board?" The singing woman with a sensual southern accent sang out, transporting me from my tropical reverie and back to reality. I climbed up the steps from the galley to the cockpit to greet her. I continued my upward gaze at the long blonde hair that flowed down from her head and also stopped at her tiny waist. She had a body that just wouldn't quit. I had to lean against the captain's chair because she made my knees weak. "Darling, you play a mean ukulele. I wish you could have accompanied me when I was singing and dancing in Miami just after I graduated from Yale Law." But before my car accident, she pointed to her artificial leg. She gave me one of those southern comfort kisses that rocked my world. She pulled back her shoulders to accentuate her chest so she could be sure I noticed them. Hell, they were all that I had thought about for the past month. She needn't have worried that I'd miss them, or the open buttons on her clingy silk dress that revealed an immodestly tantalizing view of only partially hidden treasures. I wondered if she was a devil in a blue dress. I hope you can help me professionally. I desperately need to hire a private investigator who knows his way around a boat, she said in a breathy Marilyn Monroe kind of voice, and you are obviously my man. Oh my goodness, would I love to always be her man. However, I knew I couldn't afford her for much longer. I don't really know the cost of women's clothing, but even I could tell that her shoes, her tailored outfit, and her jewelry cost more than a townhouse in Beverly Hills, more than I could ever afford to buy for her. She was exponentially out of my price range. She was the kind of woman Jim Morrison sang about in L.A. Woman. Jim Morrison was immortalized on a wall a few blocks from me. Walking past it every day reminded me to beware of a certain type of L.A. woman, this kind of L.A. woman. She handed me her small dog, a toy poodle with a red rhinestone collar, and extended her hand so that I could help her onto my boat. Her long, elegant fingers ended in gold-painted fingernails. Her hand had an ethereal softness. I didn't imagine they'd ever done any manual labor or even touched dishwater. I didn't want to let go of her hand, but I did when her dog bit my other hand. "Ouch!" I screamed as her dog started yapping. "Butterscotch," she said as she looked straight into the face of her dog. He held his head low in shame. My dogs heard the barking and ran up onto the deck from down below. I called them the Wild Bunch. Duke, Shadow, Rocky, and Scout started barking their collective heads off. They're loud, even for Chihuahuas. "How was your trip?" I asked. "In addition to being your girlfriend, I'm a divorce lawyer representing a husband whose wife stole his boat." I stopped listening. She said she was my girlfriend. I hugged her, but she withdrew from me. "First business, then pleasure," she said. "It's a 50-foot trawler. It's named the Honor, and it's usually docked right across from us." She pointed to the vacant slip 100 feet away. "The boat is his sole and separate property, and I want to hire you to find it and return it to him." I sat down on one of 3 benches in the cockpit. Ava sat down next to me, practically on top of me. Ava put her hand on my arm and rubbed it in a semi-predictable diamond, an emerald, a ruby, and a Yale-class ring with a sapphire. She was expensive. Most women in Los Angeles were expensive. I knew she was lavishly expensive. I mean, she lived on a yacht. I feared that eventually she would leave me for a guy with money, a lot of money. You lead such an exciting life. You're handsome. You live on a boat. You deal in danger. Most of the men I deal with are going through a divorce. They're whipped and beaten. They aren't the kind of men I can look up to. They aren't like you. That's why I'm with you. I smiled as I looked deeply into her totally hazel eyes. Ava was the biggest liar I'd ever met, but I loved listening to her fabulous fabrications about me. As she rubbed my arm, her hand was still on my arm. This was not just my imagination. I didn't know what game we were playing, but I was winning. I mean, who doesn't like to be flattered and stroked? I just wished I were dumb enough to believe her. She was clearly the most exciting woman I'd ever met. You never talk about your cases. I've had my share of close calls. It's just part of the game, but I've been lucky. The tall tale I told should have embarrassed me. I would say or do anything to please this woman, and she knew it. In order to systematize an incremental capability, I'll need to see the ownership papers, some photos of the boat, its registration numbers when it was stolen, and any idea you may have on where it is, I asked without ever taking my eyes from hers. I had no idea what it meant to systematize an incremental capability, but I had learned to say things like that when I didn't know the answer. That gobbledygook impressed people and cowed them into submission. I hoped it would have the same effect on Ava. "You sound very efficient, very take charge. I feel confident that you're not just a great lover, but a great detective." Ava smiled at me with an intensity that started a fire inside me. She called me a great lover. I could now die a happy man. She opened an expensive brown leather Hermes attaché case and handed me a file folder filled with everything I had asked her for and more. Why don't you call the police or the Coast Guard? Because this is a civil matter. They wouldn't care. Before I get started, we should discuss my fee, I started to say. Ava crossed her legs and uncrossed them, showing a lot more thigh than most women would want to show to a man unless she was dancing on a pole. She wasn't wearing panties. I enjoyed the show, but I couldn't push the song Waiting in Vain from my mind. Eventually I did, but it was replaced with Is This Love? Ava removed an envelope from Mr. Hermes, opened it, and counted out 4,100 bills. This should cover your immediate expenses. I'll pay you 3,000 more when you return the boat to my client. I was hoping to get 500 total, so I was overjoyed, but tried not to show it. That money would be the next back payment on my student debt. The rest I would gladly spend on Ava. The boat was taken about 5 or 6 hours ago. Here are the keys to the boat. I assume they're headed to Mexico since that's 300 miles away, and the boat can only travel at 7 miles an hour. You have plenty of time to catch them, so we might as well enjoy ourselves for a while. Ava dangled the keys in front of me as if she was trying to hypnotize me. She kissed me, then she unbuttoned her blouse. The loving was incredible. Even though I didn't trust this woman, I did lust after her and was halfway in love with her. No, that's not true. I was head over heels in love with her. I thought that was her plan. I didn't know why, and I didn't care why. From the moment I met her, my brain told me she was trouble, but I didn't care. For just an instant, blood returned to my brain, and I realized that she wasn't just trouble, she was dangerous. Then she rubbed me between my thighs, and the blood again left my brain, and I stopped thinking. After 2 more go-rounds, she said, I really needed that. Here's my card with my cell number. Call me any hour of the night or day when you find the boat. There was only 1 battery bar showing. I'd have to remember to charge it. When I recover your boat, where do you want me to take it? I asked. I like your confidence. Ava wrote an address on the back of her card. This is a house at Seaside Heights in San Diego with a boat dock in the back. Park it there. It's my guess that his wife is taking the boat to Mexico, so you don't have any time to waste. Ava shook my hand goodbye with an extra squeeze. After we finish with this boat business, we should sail to Santa Barbara for a romantic weekend. But first you absolutely have to find this boat. I nodded my head yes. Once again, Ava pulled back her shoulders and thrust out her chest. She used her chest as a weapon of mass destruction to which no straight man was invulnerable. It was like they were 2 of Star Trek's phasers set to stun, or maybe kill. She looked down at my crotch and smiled when she saw that she'd been successful. I couldn't stop myself. I put my arms around her and kissed her. Ava put her arms around me, pressed her chest against mine, pressed her good knee between my legs, and gave me the best kiss of my life as she stroked the back of my neck with her delicate fingertips while her tongue stroked mine. I wish we had more time, but the boat is sailing away, and you'll have to get started now if you're going to find it. I have to leave now. That was the moment when my brain made an emergency call to my heart, danger. Don't be an idiot. Run away. But the phone line to my heart was busy, and the message went to voicemail. Thank you, Lord, I said to myself as I helped her off of my boat and onto the dock. My legs were weak, so I braced myself against the deck table as I watched her walk away. She had a great walk. Why would a woman this hot date me, much less say she loved me? I'm no Thomas Magnum. I frankly think that I'm a wonderful catch for a woman, but I also know that a woman as hot as Ava wouldn't agree with my assessment. She was obviously playing me, but it was so totally unnecessary. Her body and her 3,000 were motivation enough. There was clearly more to this case than she told me about. She was trying much too hard. She not only turned me on, she turned on every alarm bell in my psyche, but I didn't care. She was the irresistible conductor enticing me straight down the tracks, and I was powerless to get off the speeding train before it reached the final station, which was undoubtedly Santa Monica or worse. I read all the paperwork that Ava had given me. The Honor Corporation owned the boat, which told me nothing. It was hard for me to concentrate when all I could think about was Ava. I figured that the boat really wasn't just the husband's sole and separate property. It was probably community property, and the 2 spouses were each fighting dirty to keep it. I also found the solution to the problem of finding the boat. The boat had an AIS identification number and transmitter. AIS stood for Automatic Identification System. The boat broadcast its location, course, and speed to satellites and nearby ships. I have a portable receiver on my boat. I laughed my head off. In less than 3 seconds, the ship's location popped up on the screen. It was heading south just past Long Beach at about 6 miles an hour, about 3 miles offshore. I lifted my inflatable boat with its electric motor out of the water where it floated next to my boat. Seabreeze carried it through the garage with the help of 2 guys on the dock and into the back of my pickup. I also carried the AIS tracker as well as some other devices that might come in handy for this caper. My pickup was filthy. I really needed to wash it now that I had some money. As I climbed under the car to remove the cardboard I placed there to catch leaking oil, I saw handprints near the bottom of the passenger's door above the cardboard. Something was duct taped to the frame. I shimmied under the car, removed a small electronic device, a GPS tracker, and put it in my pocket. I pulled out of the garage and noticed that a guy in an illegally parked white Chevrolet Camaro started following me. I made a couple of turns, and the car remained behind me. The Camaro was a lot faster than my 4X4. I drove through the nearest crowded shopping center and waited until someone was about to pull out of a space with 2 other cars poised to claim it. I jumped in front and let them block the aisle. I left the shopping center while my tail was still stuck behind the 2 competing drivers. I figured that tail worked for the wife's lawyer and was led to me by following the husband's lawyer. These people were pretty crafty, but so was I. I stopped at a gas station a few blocks away and dropped the GPS tracker in the back of another pickup truck. 5 minutes later, I was speeding south on the 405. There weren't that many harbors that the Honor could go to for fuel before reaching Mexico Newport Harbor, Dana Point, Oceanside, or San Diego. I checked for the AIS on my handheld unit as I pulled off of PCH Pacific Coast Highway in Newport Beach. The Honor was inside the Newport Harbor Channel. I saw the boat's final coordinates and tried to phone Ava, but my cell phone battery died. I kept thinking about Ava. She wasn't just a daydream, she was turning into my obsession. I hurried down PCH for another 10 miles and entered Newport Beach. I don't know if it was the caffeine from the Starbucks coffee or thinking about Ava, but I was incredibly excited about the job. I was going to commandeer a boat. I would be a pirate, a corsair, a buccaneer. This would be the coolest thing I'd ever done, and Ava would love me forever. I drove onto Balboa Island but couldn't find a place to park, so I drove to Lido Isle and parked my car there, about a mile from my quarry, which was docked on Harbor Island. I can never get the names of those 2 islands straight. I manhandled my inflatable boat 30 feet to the dock that said for members of Lido Isle Yacht Club only. I made another trip to grab the electric motor. I was set. I spied the treasure boat on Harbor Island, which is Newport's version of Fantasy Island. A house on Harbor Island was worth more than all of Captain Kidd's gold on Treasure Island. It's where Neptune would live if they allowed deities. The boat wasn't named the Honor. The Hispaniola was the name painted on the stern, the name of the ship in the book Treasure Island. She was a beautiful Grand Banks trawler with a lot of varnished wood. She floated behind a giant house, maybe 10,000 square feet, with a giant-sized yard. A house that large, with a lot that big on the main channel, must be worth north of 50 million. What must you have to do to make that kind of money? That's a lot of gold doubloons. I guess you had to be a pirate to afford the kind of place the boat was docked. The stern was out on the channel, touching its port side, with a large sailing yacht about 45 feet long. Next to its starboard side was a smaller sailboat. 2 men sat at the bow on deck chairs, smoking cigars and drinking beer. They were just sitting there. I guess they were guarding the boat. I touched the name painted on the stern and found, to no surprise at all, that the paint was sopping wet. They probably painted on the new name less than 10 minutes ago. I waved as I motored past, but they ignored me. I had 2 smoke bombs of the kind that I have used to hide behind when I appear or disappear on a stage during my magic act. I dropped them into the stern cockpit as I misdirected the two guards to look toward the sailboat tied next to them by saying its dock lines were loose. I kept motoring away. About a minute later, an enormous amount of smoke miraculously spewed out from the stern. I was heading back by then and yelled out, "Fire!" The two cigar smokers were stunned and confused. "Get off the boat before it blows up. Untie it from the dock so the other boats in the house don't catch fire. I'll pull it out into the channel." With that, I tied a rope from my inflatable to the port aft cleat. The men untied the mooring lines, and I towed the boat about 20 feet from the dock into the channel. Hidden by the dense smoke, I tied up to the Honor, jumped on board, ran below, inserted the keys in the ignition, ran topside, started the engines, and motored quickly away from the dock. "Arr," I said, because since I just stole a boat, I was a real live pirate, a buccaneer like Blackbeard, Jean Lafitte, or Jim Hawkins in Treasure Island. I laughed my head off until the guards realized what happened and started firing guns at me. Judging by the sound, they were .357 or .44 magnums. Two slugs shattered the windshield inches above my head. I ducked. This caper was no longer funny. Then I remembered that they execute pirates. This was clearly not a normal divorce case, but I had no time to figure that out now. The smoke still obscured me, but that wouldn't last much longer. I ran the twin throttles forward, but instead of picking up speed, the engines died. Shiver me timbers! I was only 200 feet from the house and drifting toward a small sandy beach. One guard jumped into the water and swam after me. The other tried to untie one of the sailboats. I had to think quickly. It couldn't be the batteries because the boat started quickly. The fuel gauge read over half a tank. It had to be a problem with the fuel delivery system. The swimmer mounted the swim platform and tried to climb over it. As he clutched the gunwale, there was no cutlass available, so I picked up a bottle of Heineken and smashed it down on the right hand of the scurvy dog. He screamed as he released the gunwale, and I jabbed him in the chest with my right foot and pushed him back into the water. Blood swirled around his right hand in the water. I bought myself another 20 seconds at most. I opened the fuel line cabinet and saw that both valves were turned off. I hastily switched them to the on position and started the engines again. They fired right up, and I pushed the throttles to the max and got away just as the swimming guard was about to reach the swim step. I turned around the ocean side of the island and threw the still-burning smoke grenades overboard. I also shut off the AIS transponder. I wasn't going to let them find me the way I found them. The obvious move would be for me to make my way down the main channel to the sea. That's what the guards would expect. That's what my employer would expect. That's where they'd all be looking. This trawler swam well, but she was much too slow to outrun anything quicker than a kayak. I'd have to outthink them. I turned up toward the back bay and motored to the far side of Lido Isle. I tied up at a dock behind a home with a for sale sign, with the stern facing the home. Like a score of other identical Grand Banks trawlers throughout Newport Harbor, if the bad guys were cruising after me, they wouldn't see the name of the boat on the stern. That might give me an extra minute while they had to come ashore to check it out. I needed every second I could steal. Motoring straight across Newport Harbor took me less than 5 minutes. Driving there meant going all around the bay by car and would take the bad guys at least 30 minutes, even if they knew where I was. If they had to search this side of the bay, it could take a couple of hours, unless they got lucky or smart, and had run the 2-block width of Harbor Island to see where I was headed. Down below, everything looked normal. I half expected to see pieces of hash strewn around. The large beds were neatly made, each with decorative pillows. I took a knife from the kitchen and ripped open one of the pillows. I expected to find drugs, but there was only foam inside. I ripped the covers off the king-sized bed in the main stateroom and crew quarters and discovered that they covered only mattresses. 3 large, ancient Gucci steamer trunks took up the whole guest cabin. I opened them and found that inside the steamer trunks there were no doubloons or pieces of 8, but there were stacks upon stacks of 100 bills. I counted one stack and extrapolated that there were millions of dollars in greenbacks on the boat. I was half excited and half scared to death. I was unarmed, and I knew full well that if those guys found me, They'd kill me to reclaim this pirate-worthy treasure. While I had been playing at being a pirate, I was dealing with real live buccaneers who wouldn't want me to reveal this treasure, and dead men tell no tales. I wanted to call the local police, but I didn't know if I could trust them. I also understood that they would arrest me for stealing the boat. Once I showed them the money, things would get mighty complicated. I might be killed in jail by accomplices of the bad guys or my own client. I wiped my fingerprints off everything I could possibly have touched. I removed a large circuit breaker from a panel behind and under the ignition and put it in my pocket. This boat wasn't going anywhere now that I disabled the ignition. I opened my wallet and looked at the 2 business cards that I'd received today. Obviously, if I called my client or girlfriend Ava, she'd kill me. I also realized that even if she didn't kill me, which was unlikely, she'd never pay me. I understood that she didn't love me. She only lived on my boat with me so she could keep a better eye on the treasure boat docked across from mine. I couldn't find a bag, so I filled my pockets, my shirt, and even my underpants with 100 bills. At least I'd die rich. I was running out of options. The guys who shot at me could be just seconds away from me now. Now I had no way of knowing. If I got greedy and tried to make several trips between the boat and my car, I'd probably never live to spend the money. I was sweating and shivering. My hands were trembling. I put on a Dodgers hoodie and hat for warmth that were lying on the captain's chair. I saw the other business card in my wallet for Judge Kenneth Hale. Hallelujah. I climbed into my attached dinghy and motored 1,000 feet to the boat club, where I dragged the inflatable back to the safety of my car. I started the car and slowly drove away so as not to attract any attention. I emptied my pockets, pants, and shirt of money as I drove. I put the wet stash of cash in a Trader Joe's shopping bag under my seat. I stopped at the Starbucks on PCH for another Frappuccino and coffee, and to phone Judge Hale. He was one of the few people I could trust, even though he wasn't AWOL. I was really lucky to have him in my corner. I tried to call Judge Hale from my cell phone, but the battery was dead. I found a payphone and gave him the 411 about the money I had found. I told him the address of the house on Harbor Island where I stole the boat, and the address on Lido Isle where I docked it. He said that he'd call the FBI and have them pick up the boat and raid the house. I felt pretty good. He warned me not to go back to my boat because I wouldn't be safe there. He generously offered to let me stay at his house for the night. He also warned me not to tell anyone what had happened for their safety and not to park in front of his house, but to park several blocks away. He also told me not to walk straight to his house, but to walk several blocks in a different direction to make sure no one was following me. If I was parked north of his house, to walk around the block and approach his house from the south with my hat pulled down covering my face, because most of the homes in his neighborhood had Ring cameras. He was really smart about these things. As I drove back to Los Angeles, I realized that I mistakenly told Judge Hale that I docked the boat at Balboa Island when it was really on Lido Isle. I sang a bunch of Bob Marley songs to try and calm down. After all, I was an actual pirate. I drove into Beverly Hills, a very Tony old-money neighborhood of pre-World War II mansions. A federal judgeship must pay pretty well. It lay next to the Griffith Park flight path, a low point between the mountains that separated the San Fernando Valley from the Los Angeles basin. The Hollywood freeway flowed through it on the ground, and above it was a busy thoroughfare for helicopters flying between the basin and the valley. The noise was non-stop and deafening. I took a serpentine route from my car to the judge's lavish house as he instructed. I hid my face with the Dodgers hat and hoodie and looked down at the pavement and not where I was going. I walked into a white panel van parked in a driveway blocking the sidewalk a few doors away from the judge's house. As I sauntered up the flagstone walkway to the judge's front door, I saw security cameras recording me. My Dodgers hat and hoodie covered my face and concealed it from the cameras. The judge opened the door wearing a dripping wet bathing suit under a bathrobe. The house was dark and gloomy. The dark mahogany walls made the house seem more like a mortuary. I was about to explain the correct location of the boat as I walked in the door. "Judge Hale, we have a problem." I was immediately attacked by a toy poodle with a red rhinestone collar. It was Ava Reed's toy poodle, Butterscotch. What the hell was her dog doing there? Before I could react or figure that out, Ava appeared in a wet, tight, revealing bathing suit with a large 38-inch bust and a large .38 caliber revolver, all of them aimed at me. Her chest may still have been set to stun, but the .38 revolver was clearly set to kill. She patted me down for a gun in a deliberate manner all over my body and between my legs. "Jack, I'm flattered by how glad you were to see me. So your affection was all an act," I said with a broken heart. "It wasn't an act. I lived on your boat to keep a better eye on the treasure boat, but I did think you were cute, and I really did enjoy our time together. But money is money, and business is business. Why did you have to search the boat and find our money? You've complicated everything, Jack. I didn't know you were a Dodgers fan." "I became one while I was in Los Angeles at UCLA," the judge explained as he kissed the back of Ava's neck. "What does your wife think about you and Ava?" I asked the judge. "Oh, she's out of town with her son, so Ava doesn't have to remain exiled on your boat this weekend." "Don't worry, I'm not jealous of you and Ava. We have an open relationship." Kenneth again kissed the back of Ava's neck. Fear and jealousy filled my emotions. Her hands touching my crotch would have been the high point of my month, save for her revolver touching my head. I knew that Thomas Magnum would wrest the gun from her and steal a kiss without getting shot, but I didn't know how. I guess I should start practicing that if I survive the evening. She motioned for me to follow her. We walked out to the hot tub where I recognized from TV a Los Angeles County Deputy Assistant Sheriff and an Assistant U.S. Attorney with a pockmarked face amid the bubbles. I'd always looked up to people like this. I was more saddened than shocked by their corruption. They watched Monday Night Football on a large-screen TV next to the in-ground hot tub. The TV set improvised on a glass table a little too small to hold such a large TV. A few feet away stood a large built-in stone barbecue topped with steaks. They smelled great. I wondered if I would get a steak for my last meal. Ava joined the judge, and while still pointing the gun at me, they entered the hot tub. The cold night air did wonderful things to her bust. "Ava, could you not point the gun at me? If you slip in the hot tub, it might accidentally go off. Jack, I saw you tackle that gunman in Venice. I know how quickly you can move, so no, the gun stays pointed at you. If I wasn't so scared, I'd be flattered," I thought. The judge spoke in a low, calm voice. "Jack, we are all very impressed with you. You shook our man in the marina who was following you. You found our GPS tracker in your car and disposed of it. Again, you were very clever. Taking out the battery from your cell phone was very, very professional and earned our respect. You found my boat quickly, but Jack, you've been a bad boy. You led us on a wild goose chase for the boat. Our man couldn't find it. It wasn't where you said it was. You've stolen our boat and we want it back. It's not docked on Balboa Island." "Where is it?" "It's anchored off Gilligan's Island," I answered. Ava rose from the hot tub and slapped me hard across my face. I rubbed my face. "It's docked off Fantasy Island, just like the love you claimed you had for me." "Don't act cute with us," Ava said as she slapped me across the other side of my face, just as hard as the first slap. "Ava, that wasn't called for." "I'm sorry, Jack. Where is my boat?" Kenneth shook his head. Ava sat back in the hot tub. At first, I couldn't think of a thing to say. "Judge, you told me how eternally grateful you were to me for the help I gave your son. Why did you do this to me? I'm truly sorry, but we were in a hurry, and you were the only person I knew who could operate and navigate a boat. And, well, business is business," the judge answered. "And because you're a natural-born PI," the assistant U.S. attorney added. "The guards on the boat tried to kill me. It was a risk we were willing to take," the assistant U.S. attorney smirked. "You didn't plan this very well. How would you recover your money if I was dead? That's why we had a man following you." Ava shrugged her shoulders. "He was there to protect you. When you ditched him, you outsmarted yourself. I don't believe you. As soon as I docked the boat in San Diego, he would have killed me. And now you're going to kill me. We aren't going to kill you," the judge paused, "if we don't have to. You and I are much alike. You're a buccaneer. We're barristers. It's the same thing. Tell us where you've hidden the boat, and we'll pay you 40,000. You'll become part of our group. We can use a bright young man like you. You needn't worry. In fact, there's a bottle of aged rum on the table. Why don't you pour yourself a glass and relax a little? I thought of Robert Louis Stevenson's book, Treasure Island. 15 men on the dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. Drink and the devil had done for the rest, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. I refused the rum. I needed all my wits about me. I was fighting for my life against Ivy League graduates. It was time to use all the fighting skills my dad had taught me growing up as one of the shortest kids on the dangerous streets of Venice. When you're in trouble, don't use your fists, don't use your feet, use your brain. Think fast and talk your way out of it. And as a short, skinny child, I had many times. I swear that my IQ instantly jumped by 20 points, inspired by my father's advice and my childhood experiences. With my newly found self-confidence, I ridiculed my captors. Please spare me. Do you think I came here without insurance? Didn't you think I'd have a plan B? I'm not worried. I have this situation under control and you're all screwed. Did you tell anyone about any of this? Asked the gray-haired sheriff. Are you willing to bet your lives that I didn't? It was my turn to taunt them. Jack, did you tell anyone? Added the judge. I said nothing. I couldn't decide which answer might save my life. Damn! Screamed the assistant U.S. attorney as one of the football teams scored a touchdown. You owe me 1,000, responded the federal judge with a hearty laugh. See, Jack, we're all just friends here. Despite his protestation of friendship, Ava never took her gun off me. She held the judge's hand with her other hand. If she didn't shoot me, I would probably die of a broken, jealous heart. The government doesn't pay us very much, Judge. Haven't had a raise in almost 10 years. We all have to moonlight a bit. By selling drugs? I asked. Shame on you for even thinking that, the sheriff answered. None of us touches drugs. We are drug runners. When we find drugs, we destroy them. We just confiscate their money. Think of us as crime-fighting vigilantes, Ava said without a trace of irony or sarcasm, who also profit by our good deeds. We call ourselves the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the sheriff added. If you fancy yourselves the Holy Trinity, then you must be Judas Iscariot, I pointed at Ava. Jack, one way or another, you are going to tell us where the boat is, Ava said. Tell us now. I really like you. Don't make me hurt you. Ava aimed the gun at my shaking left knee. I looked at the steaks on the barbecue as I too was getting grilled. I also saw that the pool area was covered by security cameras. Calm down, Ava, reasoned Judge Hale. There's no need for threats. Jack is a reasonable person. We're all reasonable people. Jack, you must forgive Ava. You know what they say about redheads and their tempers. I know we can work this out before we have to become impolite and perhaps worse. I looked at their hands. Each one wore a Yale class ring like the one the judge wore. I want to thank you all for confessing on tape. I'll get a substantial reward. The FBI has been on to you for a while. They followed Ava to my boat and spoke with me after she left. Do you think a PI like me was able to lose your man and steal the boat all by myself without their help? The reason your man didn't find the boat is because the FBI has it. Do you all want to go down for murder? They're listening to every word we're saying. They've recorded your confessions. They call you the Yale Mafia. I don't believe him. Ava shook her head. He's bluffing. See how he's shaking? I always shake when I'm holding the winning hand. It's my tell. How would this idiot know that we all went to Yale? We should have been more careful. The deputy shook his head. The FBI hacked into your security system. All those cameras are feeding straight to them. If you kill me, those cameras will convict you. That system hasn't worked in weeks. Try to get a workman to show up in L.A. It's impossible, the judge laughed. That's what the FBI wants you to think. There's a white FBI panel van parked across the street. Go look. And my mug is on the security system of each of your neighbors. I didn't follow your directions to cover my face. Hez right, the judge said as he poured himself tequila from a bottle next to the hot tub. One of the endless stream of helicopters flew overhead. I waved both of my hands toward it. I want you to stop screwing around with me, and now I'm going to stop screwing around with you. That's an FBI helicopter. Your game is over. "Ava, hand me the gun," slowly. "But first, if you all walk outside with me right now with your hands behind your heads, it will go better for you," the judge said in a most injudicious manner. "What if he is wearing a wire?" the nervous assistant U.S. attorney asked. I removed the boat ignition circuit breaker from my pocket and held it up to them. "Special Agent Monroe, I'm bringing the suspects out front. Don't shoot. That's not a wire. It's a circuit breaker." "Let me see it," the sheriff said. I palmed the circuit breaker and made it disappear. "But he could still have a wire," the sheriff said. "Good point," replied Ava. "Jack, take off your clothes," ordered the woman with whom I previously wanted to spend the rest of my life. "Naked. Now." Of course, it looked like I would be dead within the hour, and my wish to spend the rest of my life with her would, in some perverse way, come true. They called my bluff. So much for poker. Damn, my knees were shaking so hard I could have been dancing the Charleston. I was off balance to begin with. I was so scared I tried to take off my jeans without first removing my shoes. A 100 bill fell out of my pants. "Kick it hard for that field goal," screamed the sheriff at the TV. The ball sailed through the air. "Is that our money?" demanded the woman of my dreams as she put one arm around the judge. I was now filled more with jealousy and rage than fear. I was flustered. I tripped and fell against the giant 70-inch TV precariously perched on a glass table. As it began to fall on the ground, I subconsciously knew this was my one chance to survive and also my one chance to get my revenge on Ava. Without a conscious thought, I kicked the TV right into the pool. I scored a Super Bowl game-winning touchdown. Sparks flew out of the back of the TV as it electrocuted my screaming would-be executioners. All of Ava's muscles contracted, including her trigger finger. She shot the sheriff as she looked at me, and her pleading eyes screamed, "Help me!" It was her life for mine. If I saved her, she'd still kill me. I didn't care. I loved her and tried to reach over to her, but she was by now in the middle of the hot tub, violently shaking, and I couldn't reach her without jumping in and dying with her. I started screaming in frustration. "Damn it, I warned you not to mess with me." But I couldn't stop crying. I chose self-preservation and will probably hate myself forever because of it. Hale may have been a judge, but that day I was the jury, and the sentence was death by electrocution. They didn't die immediately. It took almost 30 seconds until all of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse slid under the water while still convulsing. I pulled up my pants and picked up my money. I wiped my fingerprints from everything I touched, including the doorbell, then I left. Again, I covered my face with my stolen Dodgers hat, hoodie, and sunglasses, while I slowly walked out of the house and back to my car. I looked straight down at the ground the whole time because who knew how many of these houses had security cameras. I was so filled with anger, hatred, sorrow, regret, jealousy, and love for Ava that I couldn't process all of my feelings. I was happy to still be alive, but I cried as I walked and sang the Jimmy Ruffin song, "What Becomes of the Broken-Hearted." I walked in the opposite direction of my car for several blocks and then made several right turns in case the police canvassed the neighbor's security cameras. I guess that's why the judge didn't want me parked in front of his house. The thought of possessing the millions of dollars on the boat was tempting. The judge had a man still looking for the boat, and by now the guys in Newport from whom I seized the boat must have figured out that I didn't go out to sea. That meant they would search all the possible places in Newport where I could have stashed the boat. There weren't that many. They must be closing in on the boat's location by now. A few minutes later and a few miles away, I found a Spanish-speaking man who understood no English speaking on his cell phone. I covered my face with my hat, hoodie, and large sunglasses. I wiped my fingerprints from the 20 that I gave him. I dialed the FBI from his cell phone. I wiped my prints from his phone. As he read from a paper that I gave him, he informed the FBI of the location of the boat and drop house. He had no idea what he was saying. Then I had him repeat it all to the Secret Service and the Newport Beach Police. Maybe the 3 agencies would keep each other honest. Maybe not. I drove aimlessly for the next few hours. Then news on the car radio reported a shootout on a boat in Newport Beach between the FBI and alleged drug smugglers over millions of dollars. I cried as I drove back to my boat. Ava was an angel who I loved with all my heart since the first morning I saw her, but I killed her. Finally, after hours of crying, I realized and accepted the heartbreaking truth: Ava wasn't my angel of the morning, but I was her angel of death. Thanks for tuning in to this wild tale of deception and danger. What would you do if you found yourself caught between love and betrayal like Jack? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more incredible stories like this one.